So I made a video talking about how to make melodies, and I thought a great follow-up would be how to make chords. I'm going to start off with using the G major scale. Now there are 7 notes in the scale. So for example, since we're in G major, if we start on G, this is our root note. The root note is in the name of the scale. If it's a G sharp major, your root note's G sharp. C major, your root note's C. Now there are 7 notes in the scale before it repeats. Since I've selected the G major scale, you can see the white notes are all the notes in the scale. I'll show you. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 before we go back to G. Oh, let's make a simple G major chord. This is G major. Now how do you know how to make this chord? This is a simple triad. Triad meaning 3 notes played at the same time. Now remember how I said there are 7 notes in a scale? Instead of reading them as their note names, try reading them as their numbers. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this triad is built with a 1, a 3, and a 5. Because like I said, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we take away our 2 and our 4, we have our 1, 3, 5. Now that's just how you make a simple triad. Now with chords, you have major and minor. You probably know major means happy, minor means sad. So this is a G major. And what if I wanted to turn that into a G minor? Now you'll see, between the G and the B, we have 3 notes. And between the B and the D, we have 2. To simplify this for you, you can see it a lot better in FL Studio. If we have 3 spaces between our first and our third, then that means major. If we have 2 notes before our first and third, that's a minor. So you'll hear, with 3 spaces, major, 2 spaces, minor. So now let's make a simple chord progression. So you might have heard of the 2-5-1 before. It's quite a common and a popular chord progression, especially in lo-fi and jazz. So let's count our notes, right? We have our G, which is our 1, and then we have our A, which is our 2. So we're doing a 2-5-1, so we start on our 2. Then we want to go to 5, so we have 2, 3, 4, 5. So our 5 will be D, and then our 1 is our G, because it's the first note in the scale. So now let's build chords off of these. So now because we're using A as our root note, let's read that as our 1. So we have 1, 2, 3, just like that. And then we go to 5. So 4, 5. And here we have an A minor. Now let's start with D. D is going to be the root note for our chord, so this is going to be our 1. So we'll count 1, 2, 3. There's our 3. And then from the 3, we're going to go 4, 5. So now we have a D major. We listen together. Then finally, we have our G. G is the root note of our chord, so this is going to be our 1. And we'll count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's a simple 2-5-1 progression. So this seems pretty simple right now, but these chords are just boring when you listen to them. Now what we can do is we can turn these chords into 7ths. 7ths are typically used in jazz lo-fi. Remember, this is just a triad and it's made up of a first, a third and a 5th. So if we're going 1, 3, 5, and we just count up again. So this is our 5, and we go 6, 7. Let's do the same thing with this chord, 5, 6, 7. And then the same with this, 5, 6, 7. Let's have a listen. Already sounds 10 times better. Now I'm going to be talking about a couple complex things. Now just like how we have a 7th, there is nothing stopping us from having a 9th, or 11th, or a 13th. Now I've just taught you chordal tones. So these lower 4 notes, the 1, 3, 5, 7, are known as chordal tones. And you can add chord extensions. Now chord extensions are notes beyond the 7th. So here we have our 7th. Anything we add above this is going to be an extension. So we have 7, 8, 9. There's a 9th. And then we can add our 11th. 9, 10, 11. And our 13th if we want. 11, 12, 13. Now I've split these up so you can see better. These lower 4 notes are our chordal tones, and these upper 3 are the chord extensions. Now going back to our original triad, I'm going to talk about inversions and voicings. I've just isolated this triad so it's easier for you to understand. Now, an inversion is when you move a note in a chord up or down an octave. Now, if I move D up an octave, this chord is still a D major. So that is our first inversion. Now, our first inversion is when you move your root note up an octave, and then your second inversion is when you move your root and your third up an octave. So both of these are D major chords. So when I put this into our first inversion, I have changed the voicing of this chord. Same thing when I do my second inversion, I've just changed the voicing of my chord. Now a voicing is just moving any note in your chord up or down an octave. Now let me show you how this is practical. So as you can see, we have our 2-5-1 progression. Visually, you can see our first and our third chord are both lower than our middle one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the voicing. I kind of want these to be in line with each other. Let's start off with our first chord. We can see that it's lower than our second. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the root note, I'm going to turn it into the first inversion. Now as you can see, it is pretty much in line with our second chord, so we don't have to worry about the second chord. Now our last chord, we can see it's a lot lower than these two. So again, we'll take the root, put it in its first inversion, and now the chords are pretty much in line. And they are still the same chords. Now we're back to the original voicing. Let's say we want to add our 7th to these chords. Now let's start with our second chord. We can obviously see that it's higher than our first and our third. So let's take our 7th and let's just move it down an octave. So now going to our first, let's take the root, the first, and move it up an octave. See how much more in line these are now. Now with the last one we can see it's obviously lower, so we're just going to take our first and move it up an octave. Now these two notes are very close, but it's still going to sound good. And if you wanted to, you could then also take your third and move it up an octave. So now we're in the F major scale and we're just going to make a chord progression together. We're going to go with our 2-5-1. So in F major, our 1 is F, so our 2 will be G. And our 5, if we count up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is our C. And our 1 is obviously our F. Now I'm just going to move these lower just for bass notes, and I'm just going to copy these up an octave. So I'm making my chords out of these, I'm just using these as bass notes to make it sound nicer. So we take our G, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's our triad, so we've got a G minor here. C, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Finally our F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's make it a bit jazzy, so we'll add our 7th. So we go 5, 6, 7. 5, 6, 7, 5, 6, 7. If we want to, we can add a 9th. Now that's going to be our chord extension. Remember, these are the chordal tones. Now because we're going beyond the 7th, we're going into extensions. We could add a 9th here, and we'll add one more. Now we'll voice these differently. Now as we can see in our second chord, our 9th is very high compared to everything else in our others. So if I take this 9th, I'll move it down an octave. Our first chord is quite a lot lower than our second now. We'll take our G, move it up an octave, and with our last one, we can see F is a bit too low, and A is a bit low as well. So this is what we started off with. And this is what we changed our simple triad into. These are pretty much the basics with just a couple more complicated things thrown in there. Hopefully it wasn't too complicated for you, and I hope this helps you understand about chords a lot more and just music theory in general. I hope this video helped, and I'll see you again in the next tutorial.